Hi, I'm Alex Bennick, and welcome to Smart People on Ice, or in chairs as the case may be. I'm fortunate enough to be joined by Adam Jacob, the CTO of Chef. Chef is a leading infrastructure automation platform. And as CTO, of course, Adam drives the technical vision for the company, but Adam's also the spiritual leader of the broader Chef community as well as the entire DevOps movement, frankly. So Adam, welcome. Thanks for joining us.
Hi, Alex.
Take me to the promised land as our spiritual leader.
I'm like the Dalai Lama of DevOps.
Yeah, that sounds good, right?
It's a good move. Yeah.
Cool. Well, before we get into DevOps and chefy stuff, I want to go back in time, understand young Adam as you were getting into technology. So how did you really, what was the early computer that was important to you? How'd you get into this racket in the beginning?
Yeah, so let's see. I got into the racket, so to speak. So my mom was a real estate agent.
Yeah.
And there was in the suburban explosion sort of era, right? And so
where was this?
In Vancouver, Washington.
Vancouver.
So outside of Portland, right? Kind of like the Kentucky part of Portland. And so she had bought a 286 with a 2400 baud modem. So she could get on the MLS, right? Oh. And so video games were cool, but the coolest thing that thing could do was call other computers and do stuff. So that was like the bulletin board era, right?
Yeah.
And the coolest thing, FidoNet blew my mind. So as soon as I saw a message board where you could put a message in and then it would wind up in Russia, I was like, that's the coolest thing I've ever seen. And I was 8. And that was amazing. And so I figured out how to run a bulletin board on the 286.
Yeah.
And the way FidoNet worked back in the day was there was a regional hub, right? And everybody would pay dues, and then they would call all the different bulletin boards and pick up their mail. So it would basically pack up all the mail that had been posted on a bulletin board and then transfer it to the hub, and then the hub would call the long distance link, right? To send the mail to someone else.
Somebody right? Some ISP somewhere had a T1.
There was no, not even, right? Yeah. Not even. And they would just call each other and they would pass this mail around. And so I scraped up, I don't know, my allowance, I suppose, at the time. And I paid my FidoNet dues, and I got the regional hub to call the computer every night at 2 in the morning and answer on the first ring. And so my parents would get woken up every night at 2 in the morning by the phone ringing for one ring, and then nothing happened, and they were super confused.
Yeah.
And finally, I fessed up to what was going on.
Talk to me a little about the origins of Chef. I know that you had your own consulting business at the time, and were working with startups, and then that sort of became Chef in some ways. But fill us in on the details there.
Yeah. So. I'm a systems administrator, right?
Yes.
So what we did was we started a consulting company that built fully automated infrastructure for startups. So you'd pay us a flat fee, and then we'd come in and build you a fully automated infrastructure, provisioning, monitoring and trending, identity management, all of it, soup to nuts, app deployment, config management. And then we'd take a retainer, right? And I started it with a buddy of mine that was the head of global services for IBM West, right?
Yeah.
The Linux technical practice. And so we did pretty good, and we were sort of victims of our own success. So we built, 12 of them or something like that in a year, which is more infrastructure than most people build in their career, right? And what we found was we were dying under the weight of our own maintenance burden, right? We put all together this code. All the code worked for any individual customer, right? So for any one person, they were pretty much fine. But when you tried to run it across 12, it got really, really brutal. So everybody cared about those minute differences, right? Nobody cared.
Yeah.
That
there's no one size fits all.
Yeah, that you could install MySQL was cool. But what made MySQL work for that customer was that one tiny tweak. That was that one config setting, right? Yeah. And how you manage that across, for us, if we were going to make our consulting firm work, one of the propositions was that we would automate all the work of running the consulting company. And so, it would be easy breezy on the maintenance fees. And that just didn't work at all. It turned out that it was super brutal. So we'd gotten to a point where it was either go get jobs, right?
Because who wants to do that?
Yeah. It stopped. It was getting to be not fun, right?
Yeah.
Or try to figure out if we could build more technology that would solve the problem. So I started writing Chef to see if I could solve the problem, right? Could I convince us that we shouldn't go get jobs?
Yeah. And was there a moment that you knew that you wanted to make that leap to do Chef not as an internal tool for your own consulting company, but to be a startup to enable other people in the community?
Yeah. So so once it worked, so
Yeah.
like once I could see Chef in front of me, it was pretty cool,
Yeah.
right? And it felt right. So, but really, like the idea of like being a startup and like we could go raise money and we could be a real business, that was Jesse Robbins,
Yeah.
right? So it was Jesse who showed up and was like, dude. So Jesse, ran at the time. He was mostly doing Velocity,
Sure.
and sort of being Jesse.
Yeah.
The
Running
like,
around in a
amazing
fireman outfit.
Yeah, right. Like with an axe and stuff.
Sure.
And like, and it was Jesse who was like, look, we can totally do this. We can go raise money. We can build a real business. Like this is going to work. And so he and I and the rest of the team together sort of came up with the original business plan for Hosted Chef, and went from being just an open source project that was going to run our consulting company to like an actual legitimate
Yeah.
like venture.
And so now, we're 2014. It's been 4 or 5 years.
Yep.
Looking back on, this journey and coming, as a technical founder in a startup, what's the advice that you would give for, the young bloods out there who are thinking about,
Yeah.
gee, I got this tool or this open source thing I'm working on. Should I, should I make a go of this? Like,
Yeah. Let's see. So if I could go back in time and give myself advice,
Yeah.
right? So one is Opscode had a lot of daddies, right? There were 5 of us.
Yeah.
And it took all 5 of us to really believe that you could do it, right? Like you couldn't take anybody out of that mix,
Yeah.
and if you had, it wouldn't have worked.
Yeah.
And along with that, none of us really knew what we were doing. So like we just knew that we were going to do it, and like so it was a little more like starting a motorcycle gang than starting a business, right? Like
Yeah.
like we were in, and we were gonna, it was like you were gonna, die together in a hail of bullets.
Yeah.
And like there was part
or
of
a
that.
motorcycle gang or a metal band.
Or a metal band,
Yeah,
right?
that would be cool.
Yeah, in my head, it's kind of like Sons of Anarchy, but we're not like that. The thing about it was that what we were actually doing was starting a business, right?
Yeah.
And we took venture money,
Yeah.
and we used that venture money to build that business and to build the software and to move what we all wanted together forward. But because like the bond of us as gang members was
Yeah.
so tight, it actually made it really difficult sometimes to talk about what the right thing to do was for the business, because you had to then disentangle whether or not were we having a crisis of faith in our motorcycle gang,
Yeah.
or were we having a conversation about what was good or bad for the business, right? And so if I could go back in time, I would be like, hey, like it's awesome that you're all like that you're friends and you believe in it and you're together and all of that's awesome, and also like getting some more clarity around the fact that like what you're there to do is to drive that thing forward in a way that works
Yeah.
is super important. And I think like if you asked everybody else, they would agree with me. I don't think
Yeah.
it's like a secret.
And now you've made it. I mean, Chef was referenced on Silicon Valley.
Yeah,
a few
right.
weeks
It
ago,
super
right?
works. Yeah, there were smoke cannons at ChefConf. Like, yeah,
Yeah.
it was good. And like, so for all of that, like, it's fine. We overcame all of those things, and
Yeah.
like the business is great.
And open source, in the community aspect of Chef has always been, at least from the very beginning, right, an important part of it and very powerful. And sometimes there are tensions with open source and building a business. Like, how have you guys thought about that and navigated that? And
Yeah.
there are a lot of companies now trying to build businesses around certain open source projects, and
Sure.
some are further along on the journey than others. But
Yeah. Well, so for me, I think open source and the business has a couple of important things to consider, right? So one is, why are you open sourcing it, right? So for me, the big reason you want to open source something from a business point of view is because it has more value in the hands of builders, and more value through proliferation than it does as proprietary functionality, right? So a good example of that is, in Chef, the ability to write a recipe, to extend Chef, to write new resources. If that stuff wasn't open source, would you use it? Do you want to build a business on it?
Right.
And that entire army of builders, like folks who do open source, they don't, they're like guys who love classic cars, right? If you go out and buy like a mint, already restored, like, 1970 Chevelle, like I'll come over to your house and be like, that is a beautiful Chevelle.
Right.
And like, maybe we'll go for a ride in it, and that'd be cool.
That would be cool.
But I'm not going to fix it up with you. Like, I'm not going to help you change the oil.
Yeah.
But if you buy like a rusted out, like piece of shit 70s Chevelle, now we're in. Like your buddies will come by, we'll drink beer, we'll be like, hey, we should buff out the rust, we should paint the car, like it needs a stripe, right? And
Yes.
and that's what open source is. Like people who come together and build it. So it needs to be a little rough,
Yeah.
right? and it's better that it's broken. And they look at those things and they don't look at the broken part of it and be like, oh, that's a bug. They look at it and see an opportunity. They're like, oh, that's the part I could file off, and like that, then the Chevelle belongs.
I can own that piece.
Right,
right.
That part's mine.
I painted that racing
stripe. Right, exactly. And even though you own the car or whatever, like it's their car and they feel some ownership over it, and they should. And so when you think about what you open source and why, like the best things to open source are the ones that builders love, that they use to build awesome stuff, when it's early enough that they can still dig in and have it matter, right? It's a bummer. Like people tend to not love or contribute a lot to open source projects that show up really late. Like if it's a fully fledged product and you just open source it, it doesn't usually change the trajectory of adoption. And that's because the builders don't care, right?